learning. So what I'm going to share with you now is a way of actually quality assuring teaching, more importantly, the impact of teaching on learning, and how to develop independent learning in learners through metacognition and so on. But the reason I'm doing this is because there are, what we want to be looking at is learning and the progress that children make rather than what the teacher's doing. So I'm switching it round. Everything's going to be flipped around today, and really would like you to sort of open yourself out and think around what systems you use in your school. So why do we need to focus more on the impact of teaching on learning? Well, I would suggest that changes in Ofsted. First of all, the curriculum unit's been disbanded. There's been, and there will be, well, there is now less emphasis on subject dives. Whoops, sorry. Because in fact, non-graded schools are not going to be have those. In fact, they probably never really had them properly. But the fact that they're not going to have them means that following an election, there could be a complete divergence in how the EIF is structured. And given that I was on the select committee for Ofsted, looking at future of Ofsted, recommendations that came out of that included getting rid of the one-word judgment, which I'm sure we're all, a party to and agree with, but also having a broader evidence base that included the use of, the data that schools have, to include that rather than just go on the IDSR. So that would be something I know which is dear to Sir Martin Oliver's heart, the new HMCI. That might be something that comes on board. And then, the report card that obviously if Labour come in, they'll be looking at. So I think all of these combined are external factors that might influence the way schools look at their quality assurance and how they look at systems leadership of the impact of teaching on learning, and start focusing in on children and on learning and progress, which is actually what we used to do many years ago. But it's kind of since 2019 gone into this kind of formulaic, let's do these subject dives. So that's the external factors. For me, most importantly, as a former HMI with Ofsted, but more importantly as a head teacher, I would want to evaluate the appropriateness of curriculum for all my pupils. I'd also want to evaluate the quality of their education experiences and their learning and progress. And with my staff, I would want a system which has buy-in by my staff and accountability for my staff, but also builds in continuous professional development. And finally, not last but not least, I would like all the findings from this, my systems leadership, I would like that to better inform the school's self-evaluation. So these are really the reasons why I feel it would be really important to look at what I'm going to share with you. And these are some of the pointers within that. What I'm looking at is how we empower our students, how we can make feedback to teachers meaningful and impactful. What part does instructional coaching play in this? How can we ensure students are making progress against their starting points? And very importantly, those students who reach a glass ceiling, because they are quite bright and actually the lessons, the learning in the lesson isn't challenging them enough, but also those who are underachieving. Also, I would like to, have a little bit of a look at peer reviews and how they work within the context of systems leadership. Okay, so just to remind ourselves, this is actually, how we all probably approach an academic year and how we approach the curriculum that we are delivering. And when I use the word curriculum, I'm not just looking at do we deliver EBAC or not. This is actually a broad-based approach to a school and how the school structures itself. And it will include all of those areas there, which include assessment, quality assurance, which include your vision, values, intent, your schemes of learning, how children learn, maybe the knowledge and skills schemas and so on. At the heart of that are our students. But how often do we actually go into lessons and really drill down on what's happening with our students? So I would suggest to you that at the moment that's probably the sorts of things that we do in our schools, all of us. You know, discussions with senior leaders, middle leaders, conversations with students in lessons, discussion with a range of students about their educational experience and attitudes to learning. And then we might visit a connected sample of lessons to triangulate the impact of learning within the curriculum to get to the learning experience of students. And there may be other ways that schools are doing this. Now, that's well and good, but really, is it embedded within the school ethos, what we're doing? And does it lead to continuous improvement? Or is it something that we're paying lip service to and we're not really thinking through how we can best optimize the systems we have in our school, especially, as I said earlier on, for the professional development of our staff? In the book that I've written, Secondary Curriculum Transformed, there is a whole chapter in there, chapter 15, that's dedicated to this, because I felt very strongly when I left Ofsted that the way we inspected then in up to 2014 was very much around looking at children and looking at their progress and learning. And that seemed to shift with subsequent HMCIs. So you know, when I wrote the book, I brought back my experience as HMI and really what was good in that. And so the book has that, and it also has case studies from schools that have implemented this. So, okay, I want to sort of just go through what I'm not suggesting. Pupil progress reviews, which I'm putting forward to you as a system. This isn't just about, you know, collating some data on your pupils to see how well they're progressing. It's not a tick box exercise. It's not a judgment of teachers' performance in lesson or of the lesson itself. It's not a generic description of learning or teaching. It's not an end in itself, a one-off, a lesson observation, or a learning walk. It definitely isn't any of these. But what it actually does is, and this is the key difference between what PPRs, pupil progress reviews, do. In some schools, they will refer to it as student learning reviews, depending on whether it tends to be primary or secondary, but it really is immaterial. The key differences would be that there is specificity of focus and impact to follow through. Learning walks typically dip in and out of lessons without gathering analytical and tangible information that can inform the whole school improvement. PPR is a powerful tool because it can help leaders improve curriculum quality. And it's equitable and inclusive. It moves away from judgments set in stone to professionally evaluative and instructional coaching. Across a cluster of schools, it can actually be used very meaningfully in terms of a peer review by year heads or subject specialists who can actually deploy that system within each other's schools and get, you know, incredibly sort of objective outcomes and information that would help the school that's being peer reviewed develop their set as another bit of evidence that comes in discussions. And what I wanted to find out before I move on is what systems people use currently. So, you know, are these, can you all see this now? You can see my slides or not? Yeah, right. What other systems do you use? Do people use learning walks or just lesson observations or, yeah. So who uses a combination of learning walks and lesson observations? Yeah, you do. Moira, everybody is it? Helen, do you as well? Yeah. Right, so I can't see anybody else. I'm assuming these are the people that are with us. Is that right? You're on.
I don't know what you can see, Meena, but it's Matt.
Oh, you're there, Matthew. Well. Yep. Yeah. Fantastic.
So we moved away from lesson observations. We do learning walks, but considering going back to some sort of lesson observations as well, sort of linked to appraisal. We don't have formal lesson observations at the moment, but we're considering going back to them next year.
Okay. Moira?
We use a matrix of learning walks, book looks. We don't do lesson observations, but we do pupil voice. and then we link that to data, and then we use that as a matrix to look at the learning experience of the student and whether they're making appropriate progress related to their prior attainment. And then looking at so we've got training split into two parts. We've got we develop our RAP, then we develop our training plan. So we've got organizational training linked to organizational quality assurance as opposed to performance management. And then we've got career professional development, which is related to the individual careers of individual people. So the training is linked to the organizational training plan. So when we look at the learning experience for a student, we've done a learning walk and we've done book looks and all the rest of it. We ask ourselves, is the problem in that classroom and the reason why these students aren't making progress a curriculum problem? In which case we work with the middle leader of that subject to look at the intent and the sequencing of the curriculum, or is it a pedagogy problem with a pedagogy of implementation in the classroom, in which case then we put some specific training in for the teacher about whatever granular element of teaching is not going well, which means that the learning isn't making progress, the learner isn't making progress. I mean, it may be a wider, it may be an SEND issue or an EAL issue, but then we triangulate all of that and we look at if there's any common themes across the academy. That means that we need to do whole school training on a specific issue. For example,
you've got your systems leadership all set up, so each piece is like a jigsaw and goes back into that's exactly. So this would actually be something that I think would resonate with you very nicely, Moira. What I'm about to explain, and Matthew, for yourself. The problem I have with learning, with observations of teaching, you're actually not observing the teaching, you're observing the teacher. And I have a real issue with that personally. And this comes from my experience as an HMI, because, it's just not representative of a continuum. It's not representative of what should be the case, which is the impact of teaching on learning. And that's the bit I think Moira's trying to get at. That's what Moira's doing with her system, I should say.
Yeah, we do.
Does that make sense, Matthew?
We do other things as well. We do
we do book looks.
We do book looks. We do other things as well. So that's just part of it. I was just talking about the formal lesson observations. We don't do.
So the unions kind of want 3 times or they've agreed 3 times a year, haven't they? Generally speaking, but most schools tend to do it 3 times a year, right? For appraisal purposes. Is that right? Or not? Am I? No.
Well, the whole system's changing, isn't it? And there's a move away from performance management.
That's why I'm asking the question. Yeah.
Great question. So from September, there's a massive move away from that. So we've done a massive rethink on that in advance, because we want to make sure that when we think about quality assurance, we're quality assuring the learning experience of the students and therefore the progress that they are making.
Exactly.
And then we've changed our thinking to organizational training related to an organizational improvement plan or specific training. And then thinking of our workforce in a more professional way, like you might in business. Thinking about career, CPD standing for career professional development rather than continuing, because training is what we do as part of the link to our development priorities and compliance. But career professional development is about our responsibility to making sure all of our employees grow. And the thing for me, sorry, I'm rabbiting, but the thing for me here is that it's not about the performance that we see, it's about the learning that we leave with young people that enables them to make progress. And so we need to frame everything that we do. This is what I'm trying to encourage in my organisation anyway. The framing of everything we do in respect of the student learning and progress, rather than in the performance that we see.
And that's why I was saying this would resonate with yourself. And I was kind of bringing Matthew in and obviously others to say that, if you keep with the lesson observation or the learning, let me just go to that slide 1 second. You know, if you do that kind of thing, okay, I would challenge schools to have a really good grip on what is the learning and progress of pupils, because pupils are not at the center of this, your teachers are. And that's why I'm saying, you know, you're judging a teacher's performance, right? So what value will that have in a sense? Also, if you're giving them I was going to say mark out, if you're giving them a grade, you know, I'm not sure what that grade says. You know, if I do an observation today, it could be a 1 year. And I always go back. I'll just say this. I don't want to keep talking about when I was an HMI. It was years ago, and really wouldn't. I'd rather think of when I was a head teacher, because when I was an HMI, I always remember going in and when we did do the grades and grading somebody. I think it was a good, you know, and they actually turned around and said to me, "But I'm always outstanding. So how have I got good?" And I was thinking, sorry. And I said to them, and I went through, because we were sitting with pupils and we were looking at their learning. And I said, well, look at the learning of what happened with your SEN pupils in that lesson. They weren't even participating. They were not, I talked to them and they didn't actually know what you were doing. You know, I looked at their work. It hadn't been marked, you know, there was no fee. And I went through it bit by bit. So I said, you tell me, you know, justify your good of yourself or your outstanding or whatever. Now that to me summed up the teacher's expectations, what they've been set up, and it sets people up to fail. I think a more equitable way of approaching this whole area is to actually, I think a bit like Moira was saying, you know, look at it as continuous professional development and career development and so on, you know, and linked to your organizational culture, rather than I'm going to go in and do lesson observations. Honestly, Matthew, this is just me speaking from the heart and from my experience. You know, there may be others who've got other experiences that feel, no, what I'm saying is not quite right.
Well, when I say we do learning walks, Meena,
I meant the lesson obs, yeah.
They are student centred, and we do talk to the students. And
no, I'm sure you do with the learning walks.
And talk to them about their work. So we're not, you know, we don't believe in judging teachers on snapshots at all.
Yeah, so you'll triangulate with your learning walks. That's what you say. Which a lot of schools do. So what I'm saying is replace your learning walks with this, and what you'll get is a more sustainable system of doing it, because it will capture it. Because a learning walk may not necessarily capture what this can capture for you. Because so what this is, let me just move on, because that was what I was, So this is basically, you know, what I was saying, deep insights. You can look for, you know, there are different ways of squaring it. And it is systemic, granular, professional teacher development. It's interesting that Moira used that word, granular. So what this comes out as is this, effectively. You're looking at it over time. You're looking at it in situ, real-time learning, aren't you? Which you do with learning walks, grant you that. Sequence and depth of knowledge and skills. You're looking at the assessed work over time and current standards in lesson. So progress over time, current progress in lesson. So how do you do that? Yes, you do book looks, but those are outside the lesson. Of course you can do those. But the whole point of being with those children in the lesson is that, first of all, you'll select those children. You will decide which children am I going to go in and look at by looking at the data. Or you might pick a middle ability, a more able pupil, or so on. And then when you're in the lesson, you'll actually look at their work while perhaps they're listening to the teacher. And then when they're working, you would then obviously question them about, you know, and I'm sure you're doing this. I'm sure all of you are doing this. But it's what happens after that I want to share with you. And again, you may be doing this as well, but it's good to just see a system that actually, you know, really can be followed through a bit more systematically. So what then happens is at the end of it, you will have, sorry, I'm just moving this down here. You know, the curriculum and assessment review. Not only will it start translating itself to instructional coaching for the staff, but also it will influence your curriculum and assessment review. So let me just go back to our national teaching standards. This is what we are having to, the teacher's standards overview. This is what we all have to, learn to do when we're teaching, so to speak. Now, what I did with this, I decided to flip it on its head and end up with some learning standards, which are these. So if you look at this actually is the flip of this. So for each one of these, on set, promote, demonstrate, and so on, I have put what the impact would be on our learners if you were to do that, really well. These learning standards are my starting point. So when I go into a lesson, I would then use these learning standards to see what was going on. I wouldn't start with looking at the teacher. I would just look at what's happening with those pupils. So my 3 pupils, for example, if I'm going, I would normally go in with another member of staff, so there's 2 of us, and one would have 3, the other one would have 3, and so you'd have 6 between you, which is pretty representative then of one lesson, isn't it, and one class. And I would look at whether these are the kinds of skills and attitudes to learning and attributes that is being generated, the learning attributes, if you like, and the progress that's being made by our pupils in that lesson. Now, if I look at that, let me just share with you and let's hope I can do this. This is a lesson, a maths lesson that I'm going to try and open up for us. And that should be open. So I should be able to share this. Yes, shouldn't I?
You
can't see it yet, can you?
No.
No, that's why I'm just trying to find the, hold on. There's something not quite happening with this PowerPoint, this Zoom link, actually, I'm sorry to say.
Did you press Control when you clicked it?
No, that's what I'm saying to you. I haven't got it on this one. Hold on a sec. It's just not coming up for some reason. I don't know why. You are screen sharing. Oh, here we go. Right, so if I just put in share and then get it up, that's it. Oh Lord, this is what I was, there we are, that's it. Right, okay, there we go. So that lesson, this is my template, and it's been modified by different schools, so you can do it the way you like. But this one in particular, so what I've got is a RAG rating. When I go into that lesson, I will find out the progress of the kids. Highly secure, working towards secure interventions needed, right? And this particular lesson, I would go in there and I would have my 3 students, if you want of another word, data up on there for me. So that would be my, are these kids, do they attend regularly? Do they not? Look at that one. It's a SEN pupil. That one's pupil premium. That one's a middle ability pupil. So, and are they working at their, if you want to put that in forecast for a secondary school, or whichever way your data, how you skew it. This lesson, so now this becomes a sort of narrative. The issue is, it is entirely focused on those 3 students. And what it does, again, flips, if you read it, and you can have these, presumably, Shane, people can have the slides, can they? Or
yeah, absolutely.
That'd be easier because there's quite a lot in there, so I don't really want to sort of spend too long on that. So what's happening here is that the summary of this is that, number 1 student, this one, was able to describe what he'd been learning and how linear simultaneous equations fitted into a sequence of lessons, and how his, algebra, his knowledge of algebra was there. You could see by questioning the students, and how he could use it to solve extended mathematical problems. He was obviously keen, very interested, and the teacher was obviously targeting this pupil, trying to help. A student 2 failed to answer a question, but she basically was not, wouldn't answer a question, and she was not confident in using mathematical language when responding to teacher. She did share her work, but then there were gaps in her response to teacher feedback and misconceptions. And student 3 is quite, relatively bright, positive residual, appeared to be coasting, not proactive, and effectively felt the work was too easy. And was just sitting back and thinking, well, I can get on with this. It's not really, it doesn't require a lot from me. So that's the kind of, this is quite long. I wouldn't have it this long normally, but I'm just doing it so you get a feel for the kind of thing. And when you've done that, then the assessment for the students, you would then sort of present, sorry, I'm just trying to get this down so you can see. Assessment for 2 of the students showed progress over time with clear question level analysis, demonstrating how skills have improved over the course of a sequence of lessons. But basically the second student had a number of misconceptions and showed that was probably the reason why, those had not been challenged and the work hadn't been sort of set for her, the feedback. So what then happens is, you don't have to have the national teacher stuff, but I did. Students would benefit, and this is the bit for the teacher. So very practical, very, very tuned into whatever was happening with those students. And it just, things like use of visualizer would help there, ensure that the students, where the teacher's given feedback, they should respond to it and so on. Develop their confidence so that they can speak like a mathematician, use hinge questions that will uncover misconceptions and so on. So very, very practical strategies, which then you can actually say, well, have you thought about going into so-and-so's lesson? Because they, in fact, are very good on developing those oracy skills, also those questioning skills, whatever, or resources that would be helpful to you. And so these are the prompts. These are the prompts. They're not, again, this whole thing is a template. It's not meant to be the entire thing that you give to start, but it's good for a training session. I use this to train because the idea is this should be in the person's head, the person who's looking at this. You don't sort of sit there reading all this, but it needs to be internalized. And these are, broadly speaking, the areas you might want to look at. So this is your pupil progress review template. Right, so this is a science lesson that you can have a look at. And this is much shorter, as you can see. Basically, I've said it's inadequate, but it was inadequate because the kids I was with were the less able kids in this lesson. So for them, the progress was very limited because it could have been requiring improvement, or it could have used that terminology I used before. Different schools use different terminology, but this is an example of a school I was working with where they really wanted this kind of terminology to be used. I wasn't very happy, but it was the head teacher's choice. So the reason was that effectively the children I was looking at, when there were a lot of them who were less able, were not actually understanding the distinction between distillation and condensation, and that was the purpose of the lesson. And they had not been given that, sort of prior knowledge. They'd apparently done it, but you could see it from their books, but they hadn't gone over, the recall wasn't there. And they were evidencing misconceptions. So it was not, for them, it couldn't have been, anything more than, if you like, less secure progress that was being made, a year 7 group. And for the more able pupils, of course, they were there and it was very easy and they were fine. So that's that one. And these were the, if you like, the instructional feedback for the teacher. So, it's pretty straightforward, again, what the teacher could have done that could have helped a little bit more. When I went back into that lesson a couple of weeks later, the teacher was doing that. I noticed they were using hinge questioning. They were developing oracy skills. The questioning was much more, it wasn't what I call ping pong, yes, no answers. They were moving around the room, asking children and then asking other children to elaborate and so on. And the feedback in the books, they actually made sure that the feedback had been done. The child had acted on the feedback. So just a summary of that is that you can look at various aspects. We're coming back to actually what you were saying, Moira. You know, if you're looking at organizational cross school, you can start doing it when you go into lessons. You may not then be looking just at learning progress, but you could start saying, well, I want to look at how different teachers develop metacognitive skills, recall, transfer, apply techniques, dialogic feedback, how they do literacy, numeracy, oracy. You know, what's going on here? Sorry. I just switched this, so sorry. Yeah, how they do particular themes across the board that really will help us to develop our organizational priorities, you know, and that is something that you can do. For example, I did in my school, when I developed this system in my own school, I started looking at the impact of teaching assistants because I was really keen to see what were they doing. And as a result of that, I ended up scheduling in time for the teachers and the teaching assistants to actually meet to talk about, because that was the biggest problem. Organizationally, they didn't have time to actually discuss what they were going to do in those lessons. So the teaching assistant just sat there while the teacher did the teaching, and the teaching assistants just basically followed on and repeated what the teacher said with the child they were working with. It wasn't hugely productive. So we reassessed that and scheduled in meeting times for them as much as we could. So that's, you know, one other way of using it. And then obviously you could use within subject and cross school, you can look at a suite of subjects, variability, and gather that data. It's actually really helpful. Because I think you mentioned again, Moira, you know, is this a departmental thing? Does it go to the middle leader, or is this something to do with a particular teacher pedagogy or assessment? So variability, I mean, what we found, interestingly, we did a book look on this where we took different books, books from different subjects for particular pupils. So we took, you know, art, English, maths, whatever, for these particular pupils, and then looked at it, and it was quite remarkable how a child could do so well in science but actually flounder in maths, you know, or a child did really well in history but not very well in English, you know. So the variability was sort of what are we looking at here? And actually that was a massively big area for us with our heads of department, you know, and what we were looking at in terms of organizational, you know, were they aware of that, the variability within their own departments and across departments? So that was interesting because then they undertook some curriculum sequencing. So they started looking at how, you know, if they were teaching ratios or fractions in maths, then they needed to be working alongside the science department. So the science department knew that was happening. That happened before the science department came along and started trying to teach. Otherwise, what we were getting with children sitting in science who literally, you know, sort of thought, well, what's this all about? And so the science teacher was having to teach them ratios and fractions or whatever it may be. And why students achieve better with certain teachers or in certain subjects. And also then, you know, we did moderation. So we actually got subject pairings looking at those book looks and looking at attitudes to learning. So, for example, in some books, you know, the children's handwriting was beautiful. In others, it was absolutely awful. It was doodles and all of this going on. Yeah, so it really provides a lot of you know, what should we say, scope, potential for getting a lot of information systematically around organization, but also teachers. And then the bit that I really wanted to stress was that the instructional coaching bit, which comes from that feedback that we were giving teachers, I went the whole way, and we ended up getting some coaches. You know, we trained some of our teachers to actually help some of those other teachers, you know, work with them on that good practice, developing it. So it wasn't just us going into lessons or middle leaders going to lessons, but we had about 5 teachers who really wanted to do this. And, you know, we gave them some time to work with the teachers that, you know, maybe the ones that kind of didn't get it every time you gave the feedback, they still managed to not realize what needed to be done. So the coaches actually went into the lessons or worked with them outside the lessons. And, it really is a creative way of doing it. It's not an accountability tool. And to be honest, it's so necessary. I mean, goodness sake, we do coaching in so many other areas of our life. We do it with students as well, most importantly, but we do it in sports, in every area, every skill that needs to be learned. And I find it kind of strange that we don't think of this as the way forward for teachers, rather than sort of going in and doing sort of observations or whatever. I think it is a great way of doing it, and it's very non-threatening. So because the thing about teaching, and I'm sure you possibly are aware of this, that teachers will go into lessons doing perhaps what they've always done and taught things in a certain way. I know I do, I did, and up until I stopped being a head teacher, I was still teaching when I was a head teacher. And it was fine, I thought. But then you don't realize that actually when someone else is in there and they're seeing things you can't see, it is actually great to have your assumptions challenged. So I think it's a good way to go and to have those opportunities to process new learning. So I've got a coaching guide here, which I will send you. We don't have much time for me to sort of, start, but I can send you the coaching guide as a PDF, which might be helpful for you, and a coaching action plan as well. That would help you sort of have a look at it. If we've got a minute at the end, I will bring it up on the screen so you can see it. So that's PPRs. The next bit I was going to look at was this, but I was just wondering, before I go on to that, comments, observations, thoughts from yourselves, from colleagues. Yes, Moira, I thought you might have some.
So the biggest question in my head is, because we're in a window probably starting in September, and the biggest question in my head is, given the announcements around ungraded inspections, taking away the subject deep dives, and looking at extended learning walks, do you think that the shape of the way an inspection feels might feel more like this than what we've been used to?
I definitely do. The reason being, when I was on that select committee, which I wish, that it's ridiculous, really. You're on a select committee. They gathered so much evidence from people. I was one of those that was actually in the room, with the minister and everybody sort of asking questions, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Okay. And there was a general consensus from the people who were selected to be on the select committee, if you like, to give evidence, that we need to move away from this kind of formulaic subject dive, because what we're getting from that, we're looking at a curriculum. Now, the curriculum is only valid which is inappropriate for your school. So, Moira, your curriculum could be markedly different to Matthew's curriculum or Helen's curriculum. And so effectively, what are we getting from this? Well, at the point at which we speak now, well, I think it's, the fact that the curriculum unit's been disbanded means that there is no longer that slavish, assumption or slavish addiction to this is what a curriculum should look like. That was the purpose of the curriculum unit. Okay, I know some of the people who were in there, and it was, this kind of research that they'd done, that apparently curriculum should look like this, okay, based on Gove's original idea. Now, that to me is clearly the anathema that is creating a lot of problems in schools, because if your curriculum isn't like that, and let's face it, that curriculum that curriculum that they've created, which you should adhere to, the sequencing and so on, it is the same for primary as it is for secondary and even early years. That silo thinking, we've got to have this subject and then we can't have interdisciplinary and so on. Now, who's to say that for your school that might be the better approach, the interdisciplinary? Working maths and science, doing some work together, and English history, whatever. And it is better. I mean, a lot of schools have shown that it can be better. A lot of private schools do it. independent schools. So people sitting around that table with ministers were very clear that actually this notion of a curriculum is meaningless. What is meaningful is how appropriate is whatever curriculum you have for all your pupils. You know, if it was so appropriate, this concept they have of this curriculum, why are 1.7 million children missing from school? You know, at this point in time, it's never been like this, but 1.7 million children voted with their feet and don't attend school nationally. So these were the kinds of evidence we were putting forward. We also said the grades that are being used, you know, this grading system is wrong and it should be replaced by a narrative, a bit like the sort of narrative, you know, that we used to have, but actually probably more meaningful as a narrative. And that presents the sort of strengths and areas for development for a school based on solid evidence. So they were the two main findings that actually came out. You know, and people were actually quite wedded to that and saying, you know, other countries in the world do this similar approach. And it really is bizarre that the UK is still, or England has, and not even other countries, Wales has a similar approach. And it's weird that England has still, you know, it's anachronistic that England is still wedded to this idea of a curriculum, one size fits all. So, you know, in answer to your question, it's a very long answer, Moira, forgive me, but yes, my I am passionate about this. So you've started me off on my little passion, and I would suggest it's going to change. Not least, I said at the beginning, Sir Martin Oliver is very keen on the use of data. So he wants to look at that and go back to looking at, for example, exclusions, you know, and not just data for data's sake, but what progress the kids making against their starting points, you know. Yeah, Moira.
I think he's going to be really focusing on those pupil groups, isn't he, as well? The progress of SEND, the progress of disadvantage, the equity of the provision of education within the school for the learning of those groups. And he's absolutely gone in for schools with low pupil premium, where it's the overall progress is disguised by the fact that they only have a few students in those categories.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, at the moment, the only data that inspectors tend to look at is the IDSR. Well, how can you possibly look at headline data and say, yep, your school's good, RI, whatever? You do need to look at what lies underneath. You need to look at those pupil groups. Aren't they important? And they, you know, they always have been, they should be, right? Sorry, Matthew, were you going to say something there? No, okay. All right.
Meena, is it okay? Can I just ask?
Yeah.
Do you hear me? I was just going to ask Rachel. I don't know. I know Rachel's on it herself. I know earlier you unmuted yourself. I didn't know if you had the chance to.
I can't even see Rachel. Is she there? She's.
Yes, that's what I thought. I thought you might not see it if you scroll down.
No,
I don't know whether you've got anything you wanted to ask Rachel or if.
Yeah, I'd love to ask Rachel if she's there.
Hello, hi. No, I didn't have anything specific just now. I think maybe a few conversations ago, but it's fine.
Oh, no, please do say what you would like to say. I didn't even know you were there. Forgive me. I can only see for some reason only people on here. Yeah.
I will unmute if I have something else to add.
Sorry, and there's Carmela as well. Sorry, yes. No, you're okay, or you want to say something, Rachel?
I'm fine at the moment, thank you.
Okay. Carmela?
Sorry, that's just what.
No, okay. Well, I mean, then I'll finish on that one. And really what I wanted to do was just approach this, because this is really, you know, what I'm saying here is, why do we need to do this? You know, what attributes and skills do our young people need as a competitive world? These are the skills we need. They are, I think, you know, again, not ones that we consciously teach at all. Because, you know, there's this great emphasis at the moment on knowledge, but in schools where they feel a bit more enlightened, you know, a bit more aware that these are the skills, they will work them into the curriculum. But, you know, if you're looking at self-regulation and looking at how important that is, metacognition, it has been recognized through research that there are, you know, you do need to have it if you want children to be achieving their full potential. And here we have is particularly effective for lower achieving and older pupils. It really does allow them to embed key concepts into their long-term memory and apply them fluently. So I'm sure you're all aware of this. This is just me revisiting. One thing I will say to you is the whole point about, Ofsted big thing about cognitive skills at the moment, and can they remember what they've learned and so on, right, in their EIF at the moment. That is the big thing, isn't it? And schools are being penalised if a child can't remember, I don't know, my subject was French, so if they can't remember the past tense or the verb aller, to go, then, goodness, and they only learnt it last week. There's something wrong there, isn't there? Well, I would suggest very strongly that the limit that your short-term working memory, and this is based on research, you make 3 underlying assumptions: that students are interested in what's being taught, are motivated, engage proactively, and are alert. Now, this is the context of what's happening in schools, isn't it? I think we can all agree on that. I don't think there's anyone sitting here who wouldn't say, no, this is fine. We are aware there's sleep deprivation. We know that they could be, if children are not coming into school, where are the checks and balances that they catch up? What's happening, social media is having a huge impact on children's concentration span and focus. There are loads of distractions. And the other thing social media is doing is actually limiting, their focus now when they go into lessons. If a teacher is doing PowerPoints, this has been well researched, that sort of flipping from one slide to another, children are now getting so inured to that flip, because they're so used to doing it on their phones that actually the information isn't necessarily going in, especially with children who are less able, or children who've got language difficulties, dyslexic pupils, because it mimics the way a phone works. So they've actually taken on that, I'm going to switch off button that goes off in their head. And that's kind of not really helping. Also, the perception that learning is irrelevant, whatever they're learning doesn't appear to, they become unmotivated, or subjects are not of interest, absence, and so on. So how can you maintain this in a lesson? Because this is the only way your long-term memory is going to work, if you've got all of these barriers going on. So, and these are the kinds of examples that we need that for, the cognitive skills that we're needing to, these are actual examples. Now, how can you actually ensure that your pupils, your students, are going to be able to do this if that's going on in their head? One example I've got here of how you might do that is looking at this particular problem. So I'll just show you this. This is easier for you to follow than all the text there. So we've got this example for a child who's having to work that out. And what that child knows, they actually know how they've done it before. They have to think, what do I know about this type of problem? That's the metacognition bit now coming in. And thinking through what strategies are different ways of solving them. Now, the child might write out the equations, might sort of, think, how can I do that? And then will self-monitor. Now, all of this, the planning, the monitoring, the evaluation, this is not going to work unless just give me 2 seconds. This is not going to work because the idea is, translating the words into an equation. That's what the child's having to do. This is not going to work unless they've been taught how to do that reflection. Because what happens typically with children is they get discouraged. They might see their peers doing well. So then basically what happens is they lose interest, or they think, I'm not going to get this, and they'll just leave, they'll just stop. They'll stop actually at that point. So, they'll think, well, I don't know how to do this. It's not working. But so what do I do now? And then they'll give up. The self-regulation bit comes in where a teacher will actually work with them in different ways. So that self-regulation bit is this. So effectively, what you need to be doing is looking at the feedback that a teacher will give using things like scaffolding, actually giving loads of modeling. And I'm sure I'm not saying anything that that all of us don't know here. But the thing is it built into the curriculum? That's what I would say. It can be built into the curriculum because it can be built in through blocking and interleaving. And blocking and interleaving will encourage metacognitive skills. So normally what we do in our teaching is blocking. We use that for initial learning. We actually, use blocking to, if we're doing fractions, we'll do loads. And if you go into lessons, you might see, a child doing loads and loads of examples of fractions. Interleaving will mean that they actually will have other aspects of proportionality coming into that lesson, which challenges them. So they might start looking at ratios. Initially looking at ratios, the teacher might say, well, these are fractions, but actually I just want to show you how this would translate into ratio. Not, oh, we're going to do ratios next week. They might start that. And what that happens is these combinations of related ideas and concepts form patterns in the child's brain. They're having to really rethink. They're not switching off, they're thinking, because the teacher is now giving them something to, kind of, oh, right, I can see now there's a pattern going on here. And switching between different similar problems or concepts within the same lesson increases the challenge. Challenge leads to mistakes, which we all have to say to the child, their mindset, flexible mindset, whatever, not mindset, flexible mind growth. The challenge leads to mistakes and builds better roads in pupils' brains. And that is what I would say is, schools don't think about, when they think metacognition, they think about what's happening in those lessons with the teacher. What I would suggest is it's a bigger issue. It's around your curriculum and how, if you want to get that child here to get to that point of cognition, then what you need to think about is how often do you give that child that opportunity to start switching between different concepts in a lesson? And how often do you actually challenge the children? All of them, including SEND. You don't just think, oh, this is more able now. We'll get the more able children to do the ratios while the rest can just do fractions. No, let them all have a go. And the best maths lesson I ever saw was where the children, the children who were the least confident were asked to come up and use a visualizer to show how they worked out a particular, it was algebraic equations again, of course, it was year 8. And the child was very uncertain and very underconfident, but he carried on because the staff, the teacher was supporting, the class was supporting. And they managed to get there in the end. And the look on his face when he managed to get it right, it took a long time, but he managed to get it right. And he was so proud of himself. And then he sat down and then basically another child did who was more able and obviously got it. And so on and so forth. That was probably one of the best lessons I've seen for a long time. This was a school I was supporting. Now, just coming back to this, so we can see that, what he's going to do, a child that is really resilient and motivated because they've had lots of practice and they don't kind of give up, right? They don't give up. They actually will attempt other strategies. And the teacher can, at the start of the lesson, say, these are the different strategies you could be doing. And that's what that teacher did. So look at what you're doing. If it doesn't work, try that one. And here, as we all know, these prime skills come under the umbrella term of executive function. And it is very much about the impact it has on both emotional thinking processes, mental capacity for planning, organization, efficient data. So we need to be encouraging that in children. They're not passive learners. All learners are active, but it's about whether we can switch on that button of that switch of active learning, or whether we put in passive learning. And the issue we have in schools, largely because, it is very complex, isn't it? If you've got 30 different children, different needs and so on, to actually think through all of this. the issue is therefore, how do we allow all this to happen, not just in lessons, but across a curriculum? And finally, I'm just going to move on here, is I just wanted to bring this in. Forgive me for my personal passion again, but I worked with schools in Dubai for about 3 years, and in Dubai, this is used, AI is used now, and it's legitimately used. And I saw some fabulous use. I don't know how many of colleagues sitting here are using Chat GPT or Chat PDF or whatever in their schools. Is anyone doing any of this or not? No, maybe not. No. Yes, Lindsay, you are? You're nodding. I can't hear you, Lindsay. You're on mute anyway. Yep, still on. I don't know. You're talking, but I can't hear you. Oh, what a shame. No. No. Has it gone into your chat? No, it's I'm sure this happened last time. Anyway, I'm sure if you could just put it in the chat, that'd be great. But you know, if you can, this is another way of developing agency in learning, and I just feel it's a missed trick in this country at the moment. You know, Chat GPT is brilliant, and I've seen it done where they will take, you know, they actually, the children have to develop those persuasive arguments. They've got, rather than reading about it in a text, they actually have that person, you know, it's been programmed, and basically the child will then have that, or the pupil will have that conversation with them, and actually start to understand, you know, the new perspectives. So they could be interviewing a scientist about the discovery, or a soldier in a World War One trench, and it brings it to life. The second one, the PDF AI tutor guidance, you know, 3 different questions. They use AI for feedback to develop the answer. And in a sense, you actually need literacy skills for that, because so it starts testing those literacy skills of a pupil. This one, you can start doing it orally, or you can do it, I saw it being done orally as well as, you know, writing. So again, literacy skills, oracy skills. And then this one is just building quizzes, tests, lesson plans. And it, you know, this particular aspect of it checks the teacher's questions are inclusive and accessible. The nice thing about this is that obviously a teacher would check that. And if you've got the right software, you can check, as we all know, you can check whatever the children are using to see whether it is actually them, or they have literally cribbed it from AI. The way I see it, when Google first came out, you know, I used to go into lessons when I was at HMI and used to see kids literally copying and pasting off this, you know, website. And then you'd ask them. In one case, I had a child who was doing Norman castles, and he'd written so much, you know, year 7 child. It was very impressive, and a drawing of a castle with a moat. And I said, "What's a moat?" And he said, "I don't know." And I said, "You've written this entire thing about a Norman castle with a moat. What were moats using? And can you talk to me?" No idea, because he just copied it straight off the website. So I'm just saying, you know, that I think we're being probably a bit conservative with a small c at the moment, and it's something to think around.
I think, Meena, sorry,
Yeah,
just
finish.
agree with what you're saying. Lindsay had written in the chat that they're just starting to investigate and introduce the use of AI. I think for a lot of us, particularly someone like me, anyway, you know, all these new things that come out. Like, whoa, I got a minute. Where's this going, and what do we do, and how do we use it effectively? But Lindsay's saying that their year 6s have an AI activity as part of their transition as well, and they're also using it for staff with their training as well, to try and sort of support them with their workload. So that was just something that Lindsay had written.
I mean, it has so many uses, but you have to be very wary of training children. You have to train children. I've got a marvelous video which somebody made in Dubai in one of the schools by the children, which actually talked through all the different uses and how they felt about it. And it really is about, they were saying, you know, we need to be trained. We were trained in using it critically. We need to be trained, because Otherwise, you can just end up relying on it. So there is that element of it. You can't slavishly just be addicted to it. It has to be, you know, something that you can basically, what shall I say, you know, use critically and with circumspection. And but I think if it can be used well, I've seen it used well, fortunately. I think it can work really well in schools. This finally is just a summary to finish off. You know, managing cognitive overload, recalling lessons. They're just different examples, and I'm sure you're familiar with some of them. You know, I've just put them all there for you so you can have a look and add in others. But I'll just cut to the end of it. And just to say again, everything that's in there, I know Lindsay's got the book, and I was just going to say that if anyone, you know, it's all in there. But I think what the Dumas quote is for me, and the other one by Robinson, are the really two key quotes in what I've been doing today and sharing with you, that learning does not make one learned. There are those who have knowledge and those who have understanding. And the first requires memory and the second philosophy. So for me, it's about getting the understanding. And the way to do that is through the skills that we've been sharing here. And then honestly, I feel, you know, by actually the biggest impact you can have on students' learning is by promoting and participating in professional learning and development of teachers.